A while back, I created a video on how to create an onboarding library that you could reuse in all of your projects. I'm going to be using this as a starting point for the video here, but I want to enhance the functionality, as you'll see. Currently, once the user has seen the onboarding screens on first launch, a Boolean value in user defaults is set to true so that they are never presented again. I want to improve on this implementation working with another completed project by adding in the onboarding library and then modifying the implementation by adding a help button on the main screen so that the onboarding cards can be presented at any time instead of just automatically on the first launch. Second, I want to be able to add the ability to include video clips on a card instead of just an image. And finally, I want to be able to add a button on one or more of the cards that will open a specified URL in a web browser. If this is something you want to learn, then let's get started. As I mentioned in the introduction, I want to work with two projects that are available from my GitHub repositories. So please download the Onboarding SwiftUI project and the Menus in SwiftUI project and unzip them and launch them both. Links to both are in the description below. If you haven't already watched the first onboarding video, then I suggest that you watch it first, as I'm not going to be going over how I built the library here. I'm just going to add to it. I've downloaded them both to a folder on my desktop, and it contains another folder called Screen Captures that will become clear shortly. Once you have them both downloaded, open them both and let's take a look at what we have. You saw the onboarding application in the introduction, so let's just, as a refresher, take a look at this Menus app. It's a list of food items, and you can tap on an item and edit the number of units consumed. Nothing too exciting. However, if a person were to use this application for the first time, indeed, she'd have a problem learning how to use the app. It's not a particularly good UI design at all. It was constructed just to show you how to add menus in SwiftUI 2. I'd like to add that onboarding library to this project and then enhance it as I discussed. The first thing we need to do is add the onboarding files to our food intake or our menus project. So let me switch to the onboarding project and move it over so I can see both of the file structures, as I'm going to need to copy some files and code from the onboarding to the menus project. It's these 5 files that we will need to copy across from our project, and of course make some modifications. We won't be copying over any of the image assets, so they're not applicable. So let's copy these files now, making sure that when we copy the files, we use Copy Files if needed selected. I also want to put these all in a group in my Menus project. So I'll create a group with this selection, and I'll call it Onboarding. The card information that we have in our onboarding cards is entered in the onboard data file. So since we have not copied over any assets, we won't see any of the images referenced here in the image property. I'm not going to worry about that right now, as I'll be fixing that soon. What we need to do is implement this on our project. So back in the onboarding project and the content view, copy these 3 lines, the state and app storage properties, along with the onboard set variable from here, and we'll paste them into the same location at the top of our content view in our menus project. Now we need to embed our content view in a Z-stack. And since we're going to be adding a button to our navigation view, when our onboarding screens are present, we want to make sure that our toolbar, where the navigation bar is going to be disabled. So we'll embed the entire navigation view in a Z-stack. Then, as the last item of the Z-stack, we need to have the code that will present the onboarding screens when show onboarding is true. So we'll return to the onboarding project and copy that if clause here and paste it in as that last item of our Z-stack. Back in the onboarding project, we'll copy the disabled and blur modifiers from the V-stack there and this time we'll attach them to the navigation view in the Menus project. Once more, back in the onboarding project, we'll copy the entire onAppear function on the Z-stack and paste it into the same location of the Z-stack on our Menus project. We'll remove this one line of code that we use for testing in the onboarding project. So let's see if we have it working. On first run, after a pause of 1 second, the onboarding screens appear. Of course, without the images, we get blank spaces, but we'll fix that soon. Remember that once the onboarding screens have been viewed once, the show onboarding user defaults variable is set to true, so the onAppear function is only activated on that first launch. We won't see it again. So let's add a button to the navigation bar that we can use to show them on demand. On the VStack, add a toolbar modifier with a toolbar item with a placement of navigation bar leading. For the content of that toolbar item, we'll create a button, and the action is going to be with animation, show onboarding equals true. And the button label will be a label that will be an image of system name $.circle.fill. If I run the app now, you see that the onboarding screens don't appear on launch, as expected. However, you should now be able to tap the button on our toolbar to display the onboarding/help screens at will. Now, before we start to modify the code for our onboarding to allow for videos and a button link, let's modify the content of our onboard data first. In the first, we'll have an image. The second will be a video clip. And the third is going to link to the app website. So I only need 3 items, so let's remove the last 2. For the first item, we can have a title of welcome, and I will have an image called welcome, and text that will say, track your food intake, swipe to the next screen for more information. We don't have that image yet, but we will in just a minute. For the second, set the title to update count, and just remove the image string for now. We'll be using this field, but we'll leave it blank, and we'll be replacing this by the name of a video clip that we still need to create. For the text, we'll just say, tap on any item to update the quantity or delete. And for the final third item, the title will be Visit Website. And we can use the image that we used for our launch screen. And its red icon. And the text will say, visit the application website for information about the app and how to contact the developer. So for that welcome image, let's just take a snapshot of one of our items. So let's run the simulator now. Let me hide our code first to reveal the Finder, and notice that I have those 2 projects here in this folder, and an additional folder called Screen Captures. And this is where I want to save my screen captures that I'm going to be creating. So for the welcome screen, I'm just going to take a snapshot of this Peaches item. Now there are all sorts of screen capture utilities available for both images and videos, and my application of choice actually is Snagit from TechSmith. However, I recognize that not everyone has that, so for this video, I'm just going to create it using the built-in Mac capture utility. So I'll just type Command Shift 5, And when you do this, you get to specify the area around which you want to capture. In the toolbar of options at the bottom of the screen, make sure that you choose Capture Selected Portion. And then from the option menu, you can see that I have already specified that I want my capture to go to my Screen Captures folder. And now I can tap on Capture, and a preview shows up in a tray on the bottom right. And I can open that into an image editor by double-clicking on it. And if I liked, I could enhance or annotate that image. But as soon as I close the editor, you'll see that it shows up in my Screen Captures folder. Let's rename it to Welcome. Now, let me reveal my project, move it over, and I can drag that into my Assets catalog. If I run my app now, I see images on the first and third screens, as we've now referenced those images. Now we need to create a video that we'll be using in the second card of our card stack. And we're going to use the same Command-Shift-5, but this time record a video. For this video, I want to demonstrate tapping on an item and updating the number of items, and then saving that update. I don't need to capture the whole screen, only the top portion of my simulator. So let's go. We'll start with Command-Shift-5, and I'll select the region that I want to record. I have to make sure that I select the Record Selected Portion option this time, and then I can click on Start Recording. So let's tap on an item, and on the next screen I'll change the number of apples to 3. And then from the Action menu, I'll choose Update. That's all. And when you're done, type Command-Shift-5 once more, and then click on Stop the Recording. When the recording is complete, again, you'll find a tray at the bottom right of your screen with the recording. You can double-click on it to bring up the editor, and you can even trim. So let me just trim off the last little bit. When you're satisfied, you can tap on that Done, and the screen recording will be saved to the desktop. I'm going to change the name of mine to Instructions.movie. And then once again, like we did with the welcome image, we'll need to add it to our project. This time I'm going to drag it directly into the project, but not into the Assets folder. I'll put it in the Onboarding folder. So it's time to modify our code. The first thing I'm going to do is modify my onboard card model. I'm going to create a struct called Video Info. So when we add the video, we're going to have to scale it to fit within our card. So we'll need to know the original width and height. So I'm going to have to create variables for that. But first, we'll need to change our import to UIKit, as these will be CG floats. The two properties I'll call original width and original height. We'll also need one for the desired or new height, so I'll call it new height. And then I can create a computed property that'll be the ratio of the original width and height. So we'll call it ratio, and I'll return simply the original width divided by the original height. Next, for our onboard card struct, we can create an optional property called Video Info of type Video Info, and we'll set it to nil by default. Now we'll be using AVKit on our onboard card view to display the video, so we'll need to know the path to the video. Well, we've just uploaded the item to our app, which is our bundle, so we'll create another computed property called Path to Video. That will be an optional URL because it might fail. We'll need to return nil if the file doesn't exist, so we can use a guard statement to let the path be equal to the bundle.main.path for the resource with the name that is our image string. And since we will include the extension in our name, we'll just say of type nil. And if it doesn't exist, we'll return nil. If we've made it this far, we'll return the URL, file URL with path, using path. Back in our OB card view now, we'll import AVKit. Locate where we display our image, and let's first check to see if we have any video info property. That is, if it's not nil. And if it is nil, we'll just present the image card. If we do, we can check to see if the URL isn't nil. And if it isn't, we can add a video player with the argument player as an AV player using our URL. We can set the frame where the width is the video info ratio times our new height, and the height is the video info new height. We're almost there. On onboard set, we need to modify the new card function, adding in a video info property of onboardCard.videoInfo, which is optional, and defaulted to nil. And then we can modify the onboard struct initializer by referencing that new argument. And then finally, in our data set for our second card, we can change the name of the image to instructions.movie. And then we'll add a new property, video info, which is an instance of our onboard card.videoinfo. And we'll need to enter the 3 arguments. We'll need to have the original width and height and an estimate of what our new height should be. So to find the original width and height, we can return to the original image and do a get info on it. And I see that my dimensions are 392 by 434. So let's enter those here. And I'm just going to guess at the height to be 275. Let's test. It works, but we need to decrease the height as it's pushing our other content outside of the card. Let's try 210. Much better. The final thing I promised we'd do is add a button that would activate the opening of a web browser on your device and be directed to a specified URL. Of course, this will be optional, so like our video info, we're going to create another struct that we can use as an optional property for our onboard card. So within the onboard card file, let's add that struct that we'll call link info. And it'll have 2 properties, title and web link. Both are strings. Then add one more property to your onboard card that's an optional link info type, defaulting to nil. In onboard card view, just below the text card.text, that's where we can place our button. First, we'll check to see if it's not nil using an if-let to unwrap it to link info. And then for the button, we can use the link info title as the button title. And for the action, we'll first check to see if the URL based on our link info web link is not nil, using another if-let. And if it isn't, we'll use uiapplication.shared to open the URL. Now we'll want to stylize this button, so let's set a frame of 100 by 100. And for the background, we'll use a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 5 and a fill that's going to be a color. And since it's a button, we can use our accent color that's in our assets folder, called accent color, and we'll use that for our color. We'll set the foreground to white. The title, we'll use title 2. And finally, we'll add some padding to the top. Moving on now to the onboard set, let me separate this code out a bit for clarity. And I'll add a new optional argument to new card being link info of type onboardCard.linkInfo, which will be set to nil. And we'll need to modify the onboard card instance as well to use this. And then finally, we can return to our onboard data and add this optional argument to our new card for item 3. We'll add the link info argument, which is an onboardCard.linkInfo instance. For the title, we can use app site. And for the web link, I'll just use my own website for demo purposes. Let's see what that looks like now. Oops, looks like that button height is a little bit too tall. I'll fix that shortly, but let's see if the button works. Well, apart from that ugly mug on the web page, I think we're almost done. Let me just fix that button height. Let's change it to 50 and test once more. There you go. We've successfully added new functionality to our onboarding library. Hope you can use this in your projects. I have lots of other videos available and in the queue as well, so please check out the rest of my channel. You can also visit my website to see the apps that I have available on the App Store, and visit my GitHub page to see what I have available as public repositories. If you like what you've seen, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And ring the bell to get notified when I post new videos. I'm most active on Twitter, so please follow me there as well to find out what else I'm up to. Thanks for watching.